we have end-to-end testing with Laravel Dusk with special speaker Colin DeCarlo. It is our November edition of the GPUG. This is the last GPUG that we're going to be having for the year 2020. 2020 was a great year for the GPUG. We saw attendance go up. It was great. We have people coming in from all over the place now. That's all I'm going to say. We're good. Moving on.
The marketing campaign last year really worked.
Say again?
The marketing campaign last year really worked.
Yeah, it was huge.
People to the GPUG this year.
Yeah. It's inexplicable. All right. So let's talk about today's agenda. We're going to do our welcome and then some introductions. I'm going to have a word about our sponsors, and we'll get on with the show. And then also tonight, we will be raffling off a JetBrains subscription for 1 year of any JetBrains IDE that you'd like. So that includes PHP Storm, Data Grip, whatever JetBrains makes, you get it for a year. Okay, so a word about our sponsors. So our first sponsor for tonight is Vehicle. Vehicle's been very good to us. They give me the time to work on the GPUG. When we were meeting in real life, they were giving us the space and the pizza and whatnot. So I just wanted to thank Vehicle again for their continued support of the GPUG. Also, Givelify. So last year, or actually last month, Givelify gave us some sponsorship, allowed us to use their Zoom account so that we could have this meeting over Zoom. Peter reached out to me as well about doing tonight, but couldn't make it happen tonight. That was on me. So in the future, I believe Givelify will also be showing their support, and I believe through Zoom. The best way to get somebody to do something is to tell other people that they're doing it. So there you go. Thank you, Givelify, for your support as well. All right, about tonight's sponsor. So really excited to have him. His name is Colin DeCarlo. He is an internationally recognized speaker and author. He is He's a PHP community leader with 8-year veteran of PHP user groups. And he has spent the last 2 days-ish dealing with end-to-end testing with Dusk. As I said, I've spent literal hours learning how to use Dusk, and I can't wait to show you how it works today. It's actually, I have a good feeling about tonight. I think it's going to be really good. I think it's a fairly exhaustive demo of what Dusk can do. I think it's probably going to take, I don't know, maybe an hour before we go through things. If you have questions, just shout them out right now, or as you have them. Like, don't imagine you would have questions about something that's going to happen in about 20 minutes. But as questions come in, let's try and make this an interactive event. I am willing to go as long as I can, and as long as you're willing to listen. Okay. And I think that's it. All right. So on with the show. So what is Dusk? Here, let me just. All right. So Dusk is one of the tools available from Laravel. So I'm just going to Google it as everybody else does. And here we go. And basically, it's a tool chain that allows you to do end-to-end testing. So what does end-to-end testing mean? Well, basically, it kind of treats the application that you're testing a little bit like a black box, right? So it's the same kind of testing that you would do if you were testing WebDriver in your browser, right? You click on this, you see this. You go to the page, you make sure that the headings are there and everything kind of looks right, but you don't really have a lot of insight into like the underlying like infrastructure of the application. You don't know like really what's being written to disk or like how this thing is put together. So it's saying that it tests the okay, I guess end to end means that it's testing the application from one end all the way to the other. So like the user interface being the browser and whatnot, all the way down to the things that actually, the persistence layers or whatever, all the way through, right? If that all works, it's a very high level test, gives you a lot of coverage. So that's like one of the benefits. One of the drawbacks from something like an end-to-end test suite is they are pretty slow, right? Because like they're driving your browser, they have to wait for things, those sorts of things. So it's one of the trade-offs that you get. I just want to bring up just my editor here, and then back to where am I? Let's talk about installing Dusk first, okay? So Dusk is just a composer package. Oh, I opened it in the wrong window. Just one second. Oh, actually, before I start, is this visible? Can you see this okay, or do you want me to make it any bigger?
That's a pretty good size.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Dan. So Dusk is just a composer package, and it's for installing it. They just say in your Laravel project, just run composer require Laravel Dusk, and it shows up, I believe, or with --dev, and it'll show up in your dev dependencies. So does that mean that you can only use Dusk for like a Laravel application? No, really. I mean, Dusk, well, yes and no, I guess. You have to have a Laravel application in order to install Dusk and use it, but you can have Dusk tests things that aren't actually like your application. Like we've seen some pretty interesting uses of Dusk in the workplace. My dog wants to go outside. Sorry, just one second. Yeah, sorry about that. Anyways, we've seen some pretty interesting uses of Dusk in the workplace, from like scraping websites and whatnot. So you can use Dusk to do a lot of things. Basically, it's a way to programmatically control a web browser. So if you can do it in a web browser, Dusk can do it as well. So it's really kind of cool. But we're going to be using Dusk in this demo to test vehicle.com. So here, let me just show you kind of what I wanted to do with vehicle.com. Okay, so vehicle.com is the website of the company that I work at. And so I used this as the test bed for learning how to use Dusk. So some of the tests that I wanted to run was like, I load up vehicle.com and I see some of the page landmarks, right? So I see like the text, what do we do here? And I see some of the text, our clients, and I see community, those sorts of things. Another one of the things that I wanted to test with Laravel Dusk was that the links in the navigation are where they're supposed to be, right? So in the navigation, I see home and I see team and contact and we're hiring and podcast. I wanted to test that I can navigate to those pages as well. So like I'll have a test that says when I'm on the home page, if I click team, I navigate to the team page. Or if I'm on the home page and I click contact, I navigate to the contact page. One of the interesting things also was like, if I click podcast, that it opens a new window and I'm at podcast.vehicle.com as well. And these are all things that Dusk allows you to test, which is really kind of neat. Another one of the things that I wanted to make sure was like, if we're if we're on the contact page, that I can actually make a contact, right? So I can fill in this form and I can hit submit, and that actually creates a contact message that goes to vehicle.com and they see it and they have it. Now, one of the really cool things about Dusk is because it's integrated with your test application, like with your application, it's kind of like, instead of being a black box, it's more like a gray box. Like you can sort of see inside of it. So I can have a test that fills out this form, clicks the submit, and then I can verify that I actually have a record in my database that matches the content that was actually published in this message. So that's a really cool thing about Dusk, is I can actually see a little bit more into my application and make other assertions other than I can fill this out and I see a confirmation modal, right? I can see records in my database as well, which is really kind of cool. Another one of the things that I wanted to test was when I go to the jobs page, I can apply for a job. So if I wanted to apply for the backend developer position, I can click view position. I can fill out this form. I can attach a resume and I can submit it, and I'll see a confirmation that says, hey, thanks for applying for the job. And then I can see that also, I can see that there is a record of that job application in my database, which is really kind of cool. So I was able to figure out all of that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you those tests, and it's kind of going to be like a walkthrough almost of the documentation. Basically, like, what are some of the assertions that we have? How do you actually fill out forms? How do you select elements on a page? those sorts of things is really kind of neat. Okay. So to start off, I think what I will do is I will show a demo run of the tests. So one of the things that when Dusk runs is it will create a browser instance. Now, by default, in the default setup, Dusk will run a headless browser, right? So you don't actually see what's going on, but you can just dive into the test case and you can say, hey, don't worry about that. I want to see the browser. And so I've got these two lines commented out just for this very first demo of the tests that I'm going to walk us through me writing for the rest of the night. So in order to run a test in Dusk, the way that you do that is you have these Dusk commands here. So you can run php artisan Dusk, and that will run all of your Dusk tests. And so when you install Dusk, one of the things in the Laravel project, it creates a folder under tests called browser, and it stores your tests in here. So I have a navigation test, a jobs form test, a contact us form test, and this demo test is actually what I'm going to be running now. So what's really kind of cool about this command down here, this PHP artisan Dusk, is it will accept any flags or arguments that you can pass to PHP unit as well. So for this demo test, I have all of the tests grouped under the demo group. So I can run PHP artisan Dusk -- group equals demo, and I'll just run these tests here. So I'm going to do that, and we'll see the browser pop up, and we'll see like all of the tests run. Okay, so here's going, like, fingers crossed. So this is the contact us. I can fill in the contact us form. I have say I want to see the confirmation. It's done. This is the apply for the job test. So I can fill out the job application. I can attach a file. I can make that submission, and I see the confirmation. And there, those are the tests. So that was 8 tests, and it took about 40 seconds to run. So you can see that they are dog slow, right? And so these aren't tests that you're going to want to run every single time that you're making changes. You do want to have like your unit tests or your feature tests, things that run a lot faster, that give you that provide a tighter feedback loop. But these are really good tests to kind of like give you a sanity check. Is the application going to work? So this might be something that you might want to run in your CI build before a production deploy, right? Something like that, something where it really, really matters, right? And with Dusk, looking at the documentation for Dusk, I'm just going to bring it up here. They do have a section about various CI like services and how to actually configure Dusk to run in those as well. So we use Travis, so I could create a Travis. I could put this in my travis.yaml to run those based on various rules and those sorts of things, which is really kind of cool. All right. So one of the things I wanted to talk about was how do you configure your environment? So when I ran those tests, what you'll see when you saw that it opened up vehicle.test. So I'm using Valet to host the website. Actually, the vehicle.com is a view spa that talks to an API. So there was a little bit more work that I had to go through to get it set up. But vehicle.test is that view spa that I'm hosting locally. And so how did the application know that it was going to go to vehicle.test, right? So the way that Dusk works is in your PHP, in your Laravel application, you can create you can create an env file that is called env.dusk. Whichever environment you want. So I'm running these in my local environment. So I have a file called env.dusk.local, which I can have as my configuration, right? So anything that I want to do there. So if I wanted to use a different database, for instance, if I wanted to use vehicle Dusk as my database, I can make that configuration there. If I wanted to have a different app domain or something along those lines, I can have that there as well. So yeah, what Dusk does when it runs, when you run that artisan Dusk command, is it will take this file and it will copy it, into your .env. So it'll back up the .env. It will copy your env.dusk.local or whichever environment you're running in and copy it as your .env. Then Dusk will run, the application will run, and then once it's done, it will swap those files back. So that's how you make your configuration changes, by having an env.dusk.blank environment name file there. Okay, so let's talk actually about tests. So how do you make a test with Dusk? So there is a command for that as well. So you can type php artisan dusk. I'm not a very good typer. And then make, and then give it a name. So let's just, for instance, just do gpub test, right? And what that will do, gpub test, which is fine too. So that will create a file and it will put it in your tests browser directory. So here's our gpub test, and it has our example test. And this is where we can kind of talk about the anatomy of a Dusk test as well. So everything happens within the context of this browser. So all of your Dusk tests will start with this browse for the most part. There might be more arranging and whatnot, but like the thing that drives the browser is kicked off with this browse, and it accepts a callback function, and the function will accept any number of browser instances that you actually want. So I could have like this could be my browser, and then I could have another browser, for instance. Like let's say the example they give in the documentation is like, let's say you have a chat application, right, with multiple browsers and it uses WebSockets. You can have like browser and then like other browser, and then you can drive two browsers at once in your test. So like Jane could log into browser one, and Joe can log into the other browser, and they can have a communication. You can assert that when Jane types a message, that it shows up on Joe's browser. I mean, it's that kind of cool. So typically though, you only, in my experience so far, I've only ever had one browser instance. And then the browser has an API against it, whereas it's really kind of like Laravel-esque, right? Visit this page, assert that I see these things. There's a whole variety of assertions that are available for Dusk. You can see text, you can see links, you can assert, I forget. There's a whole list of them in the in the documentation that I recommend you take a look at. Here's something that's really cool about Dusk is what happens when a test actually fails, right? So let's say instead of Laravel, we wanted to look for like, I don't know, like Symfony, right? We're not going to have that on our website. I don't think so. I'd be surprised if we do. So I'm going to run this test, and we'll find out what actually happens when this fails. So I'm going to say assert test C Symfony, and I'm going to run that. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to do, I have a shortcut called art dusk -- filter, and then assert C Symfony. Oh yeah, this is going to fire up the browser again, and this should fail. So it is failing, right? It took a long time. So it'll wait a certain amount of time before it gives up, because like maybe the page is loading or something along the lines. But you can see that it did fail, and it said it did not see the text Symfony within the element body. I hope you guys can read that. I'm not sure. That's definitely a lot smaller. And then so it failed, and that could make somebody go, there's supposed to be Symfony on there, and they're pulling their hair and whatnot. And you're like, what did the browser see? Because remember, this runs, this actually is supposed to run headless, right? So we won't actually see the page or anything like that. So if we go in our project directory, there's this screenshots folder, which is under the browser directory in our tests. And that has all of your test failures go in there as well. And the way that they're namespaced is like the path effectively to the test, and then the test name. And so I can open this up, and I can actually open it up in this beautiful editor that I'm using. VS Code doesn't do that, I don't think. And I can see what did like the page see, right? And I believe this picture is probably, oh, that's all it saw, which surprises me. I thought that it took larger. Oh, wait. It took a screenshot of the browser and the browser was actually shown. So here, just one second. I'm going to fail this test again and we'll see more of the page, okay? So I was a little confused as to why I didn't see the rest of the vehicle homepage here. And the reason I believe that was because it actually launched a Chrome browser window. So when it took a screenshot of the visible window, which is what we actually saw. And when we run headless, it probably renders the entire page out. So let's see what we got here. Oh, maybe because, oh yeah, here it is. So there's the entire page that it saw. So when a test fails and you're like, what did this thing see? You can know just by going to the screenshots folder, which I thought was a really killer feature of these tests. Like, I think it was really helpful. And with the CI as well, you can set up these mounts so that in your CI, if your CI fails, you can see those pictures as well, which is also really cool. So there you go. So that's what happens when a test fails. All right, so looking at the first test that I wrote was testing various landmarks on the page, right? So this was the very first test, and you can see it looks a lot like our example test. So I went to the root, and I just made sure that we could see kind of like the headings that we have. So what we do, our clients, community, the Torque podcast advisors, and the meetups we host, and that's basically it. I thought maybe this would go a little bit longer, but that's it. We're done. No. So I just made sure that I can just type in the text of what I want to see, and these assertions run. And you know, like if I messed up on like Torque like that, our test would fail. And that's basically it. That was testing that I saw page landmarks. It does get, though, a little bit more interesting. So one of the things that I wanted to look at was testing the navigation menu, right? And so this is what Reinhardt was actually talking about. Like, home might actually be somewhere else, right? There could be another link. Actually, I'm using an assertion here called assert link, which kind of scopes it down a little bit more. When I say assert link, it's looking for an anchor tag in the HTML, right? And it's looking for an anchor tag with this particular text that's actually in there. One of the things that I was struggling with a lot was the "we're hiring," and that's because I needed to escape this quote. So that's one of the gotchas, is like if you have like special characters under the hood. I learned that Dusk actually uses jQuery's find method to make these assertions pass. So, which is also really kind of interesting as well, because jQuery, we don't use jQuery on the vehicle.com website, right? So Dusk, if it checks to see if jQuery exists on the page, and if it doesn't exist on the page, it modifies the head to make a request for jQuery, and it pulls it in so that it can actually use it. And this ends up using, so these selectors here are actually are passed into the jQuery find method. And jQuery's find method says if you're using special characters, you have to escape them with a backslash. So that was a tough one for me to. I was a head scratcher for a while. But assert link is how you assert that there's various links on the page. Now I can run this. I can run this test, and we can see it pass if we're interested in that. You know, what if you have home somewhere else? What if you have team somewhere else or contact somewhere else? You know, how do you kind of scope down to that? And Dusk allows you to do that with another tool that it has in its little tool belt, and that's the within. And so the way that you can do that is you can say within, and you pass in a selector. So when I was at vehicle.com or when I was at vehicle.test, I said, okay, well, what is like what selector is this in, right? So if I inspected that, I'll make this bigger so everybody can see. It's in a nav element, right? And so because it's in a nav element, what I can do in my tests is I can say within this nav element, that's just a CSS selector, run, like make these assertions. So the way that works is the second parameter into the within is another callable, and it accepts another browser instance. So all of the assertions that we see here are now scoped to that browser instance or to that actual selector, which is actually really kind of cool. So that's how you can scope your assertions into various parts of the page. And so I can run this one because it's not really kind of like boring when you don't actually see it, but this will pass as well. And that's how you do that. So that is scoping to various parts of the page, which is really kind of neat too. Here's something that I wanted to look at as well, which was, oh wow, look at that. That's something. I'm gonna fix that, just 1 second, sorry. Can't have that. So it can navigate to pages. Now this was, I got hung up here as well, right? Because I was, the idea here is, you know, if I go to the root of the page, right? And I'm just gonna close this, and I click on team, that I can see our team, right? I can see that. And the first time that I was trying that, the tests were failing, right? And I didn't know like what was going on, right? So if I try running this test, we should see them fail. Now, this is also something that I want to point out. This is really cool in that Dusk tests are just PHP unit tests. So you can see here, I'm using a data provider. And so this provides navigation pages. So if I were to jump down to this, which is actually just right, down here, I can say that I want to go to the team page and I expect to see our team. Or I want to go to the contact page and I want to see contact us. Basically, that's it. So I'm able to use like everything that I know about PHP unit with these Dusk tests. So it's like a really nice kind of like soft landing for people that know how to test with PHP unit, know Laravel, and want to get into this end-to-end testing business. So I thought, yeah, I could just say, go to the root of the page, click on the link text, which is again something like team, and make sure that I see our team, right? But if I run this test, I really hope that this fails because it leads me into the next thing that I want to show people. Yeah, they're failing. You can tell if they're going to fail because they take a very long time to fail. Wow, they take an extra long time to fail. Believe me, these are going to fail. And there we go. There's a failure. We just might have to wait just a little while longer for the other two. Maybe I should have made just the one contact us. And so what is the page actually seeing, right? Because like that, we have that ability to see. So if I go to the screenshots, let me see if there it is. So it can navigate first attempt. So if I was to open up this picture, I'm pretty sure I opened it up. I think like, there it is. So it saw the team page, right? Like the screenshot is there. You can see all the wonderful faces of the people that work here. So like, when I was looking at this, I thought, okay, well, I mean, like I can see that our team is there. Then why is the test failing? And this is when I kind of realized that this is an SPA, right? And so like all of the navigation in here is happening within the browser. And like maybe there's like some weird delay. Like when I went back to vehicle.com and I clicked on contact, it's kind of like that flashy sort of thing. And I thought, okay, well maybe when I clicked on that, like Dusk thought, okay, I'm navigated there and I'm going to look for that contact us immediately. And maybe because of like this like kind of like fade in effect or something like that, that it's not actually in the page at that time. And so what I needed to do is I needed to tell Dusk to just like slow your roll, right? Just slow down a little bit, wait for the page to be done. And then so there's a lot of tools that are available as for Dusk for telling it to wait on things. So we can tell it, if I come back into the documentation, I'm just gonna make this a little bit bigger. And we look for waiting for elements. There's an entire section on waiting for elements. So you can say you just want the browser to just chill out, just pause for a second, right? Or you could wait for a particular selector to show up on the page for 5 seconds, then it's gonna die. Or you could say wait for the selector, but only wait 1 second. Like all those sorts of things, you can just tell the browser to just chill until these sorts of things happen. Okay, so what I went with, I dug into it a lot because you can wait for a lot of things. You can wait to see text in things. You can wait till things are gone. You can go as far as waiting for like certain state things in your view application to be set. So like you can wait for various variables in your view app to be a certain value. Like it gets like that in depth, which is really kind of cool. I tried all of those, by the way, because I wasn't satisfied with just saying just wait a second, because there was that like internal fight with myself being like, that's not optimal. But I just said, you know what, forget it. Like 1 second's not going to kill people. I'm not going to be running these tests all the time. So going back to the navigation test, I have my second attempt. Why does it look like that? That is, sorry. I just said pause, right? So I say go to the root, click on the link, just wait for a second, right? And then assert that you see the heading. And now when I run this, I just want to make sure that this is skipped so that we don't have to wait all that long again. Now that it's waiting that 1 second, these tests actually pause. These tests actually pass because of that pause. They take just a little while longer to run, which I thought was actually pretty cool. Just telling the browser just to wait a minute. I didn't check to see like what it's actually doing there. Like, is it like putting like a set timeout or a busy loop or something? I didn't really care to look at the implementation. It's really kind of neat that it just waits a second there. All right, so that is waiting for elements on the page. So that was the pause thing. So that was my big learning moment on navigating the pages. Now, the next thing that I wanted to make sure is this test here. When I'm on the test and I click podcast, I want it to open I want to make sure that it opens a new window and that we're at podcast.vehicle.com. And I thought there's no way. Right? I mean, like the target on this link is another page. There's no way that I'm going to be able to make an assertion that it opened a new window and that it went to podcast.vehicle.com. But sure enough, Stack Overflow came to the rescue and gave me the solution that I was looking for. And it's kind of messy, if I'm going to be honest, just like this structure for some reason. So what we have to do is, again, we go to the root, we click on podcast, we click on that link, and then what you have to do is there's a way of getting all of the windows that are actually open in the Chrome browser that's there, and because we're targeting, because there's only ever going to be like generally like one window open, and I click a link and it's going to open a window to the right, I'm just going to grab the last one there, right? And then I can tell the browser's driver, this is that Chrome web driver, to switch over to that window, right? And then I can make any other assertion that I want. It was mind-blowing, right? And so this is actually how you do this, right? And so you say, okay, go there, click on the link, get all the windows, give me the last one, switch over to that, and then assert that the host, again, so the host is podcast.vehicle.com. This is getting into like the number of assertions that are actually available for Dusk, right? There's like a huge list of them that goes to like things on the page, the state of the actual browser, the state of the JavaScript that's running in the browser, all those sorts of things. There's a huge list of them. We can't go into them all tonight because it would just be too much. Now this though, like this test here, this is enough to make a person go, what is going on, right? And that's not great, right? That's not, like one of the things that I want to make sure is that when people read my test, they understand what's going on. And this chunk right here is not Laravel-esque, you know? Like it doesn't read as nicely as visit the root of the page, click on the link and assert that the host is this. This is just kind of like gobbledygook that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I thought, okay, well, how can I clean this up? And Dusk has got you here, right? So one of like the really nice features that I like about Laravel is the ability to have macros, right? And macros are functions that you can register with various classes. And so they're like your own user land. It's like the ability to kind of like monkey patch, if you could monkey patch. That's probably not a good word to use. It's the ability to change to give more behavior to static classes that already exist that you don't own, right? So if I wanted to add like a method here that was something like switch to new window, I can do that, right? If I could type it, window, like a deer. I can do something like that, right? So how do you do that? Well, Dusk says that you can register a service provider, and then in that service provider, you can register your macro, right? So what I thought I would do is I would have this Dusk service provider, and I would register it with my application, and I would register a macro called switch to open window. And so this is basically the same code that we saw in our navigation test. Use the browser's driver to get the window handles and then switch over to that window. So in my Dusk service provider, the only difference is it's not the browser that I'm using because these get invoked within the context of that browser object itself. Now I just have to change it to use this instead of browser. And then in my navigation test, because I'm registering that macro, I can have a test that looks like this, which is go to the root of the application, click on the podcast link, switch to the opened window, and then assert that the host is this, which I thought was really kind of cool. And I can run that, and it will pass. Well, actually, I mean, if I can paste, then it will pass. You got to be kidding me. All right, 1 second. I can do this. I promise. Copy and paste. Okay. With macro. So that will run that test that runs the switch to open window, and that will pass. So that is a way that you can add your own behavior to the browser using those macros. So you can have all sorts of userland things that are specific to like your application, or things that are too specific to fit the general use case, that they don't actually exist in the actual Dusk library. So that's with registering macros, and it makes the test read a lot better. And I thought that was really kind of cool. One of the things I want to talk about, yeah, the underlying WebDriver API. I have a little agenda I wanted to go through, and I think we're getting actually kind of close to the end here. But yeah, as Dave was saying, you can see here, like, we got those little lines, which says, it doesn't exist. Sorry, brother. But I know it exists. So like my internal ID knows it's there, which I guess is good enough for me. But yeah, word of caution that can get a little bit messy at times. And like there's a cost to these sorts of like dynamic calls and whatnot as well. So I wouldn't go too crazy with them. I really got to find out what's causing that formatting. That's wild. Anyways, so that was kind of like navigating. So when I wanted to test navigation, some of the things that we saw, just as like a brief overview, was assertions on things that we see on the page, assertions on links, how to click those links, like for instance, click link here, assertions on browser state, for instance, like what the host is. There's a whole bunch of other assertions like on like the browser as well. So there's like assert scheme. Oh wait, it doesn't know that. Here, just 1 second. Assert scheme is not. So that's like whether or not it's HTTP or HTTPS. There's all sorts of different assertions that assert what the host is. Oh, that's what I just did. You can assert fragments, which is like the part of the URL that comes after the hash. There's asserts on the query strings. There's all sorts of asserts that you can run to just actually test like the browser state as well, which is actually kind of cool. So that's kind of like an overview of like seeing things on the page, clicking things on the page, those sorts of things. What I want to get into next is interacting with the page in a more meaningful way, right? So like I'm talking form submissions. So let's get into the contact us form test, and that's going to be like the first kind of like dip into that. I'm going to close the other browser windows here. So I wrote this first test here, right? So that it can accept contact requests. And so just for your own, just so you know what I'm talking about here. Sorry, I don't know what the word I was looking for, but on the contact page for vehicle.com, we have this form here where you fill in your name, your email, your comments, and you hit submission. And on the back end, that makes a request to our API. And then we capture that contact request and we store it in our database. And so those are filled with like, oh, Vehicle is so great, such a great company. I want to work with you, and just take all of our money and give us wonderful software and things like that. It's like it's great. Anyways, moving on from there.
That's all. Everything. That's all it is. All stuff like that.
Yeah. And so we want to interact with forms here, okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to visit the contact page, and I'm going to pause for that 1 second. This is one of the things that I learned about testing this SPA, is that whenever I want to navigate to somewhere in the actual application, I need to wait that amount of time. I fiddled with like, what is the actual time? Does 500 milliseconds work? Does 250 milliseconds work? It was too flaky at those ones, so I said just a second is probably fine. And then if we're going to interact with the form here, all we have to do at this point is say type, right? And you can see this is a selector. And so this first parameter to the type method is a selector. So that can be anything. That could be like, if I was to go to, I don't know, this, and I was to copy, let's see, I think there's a way to like copy the selector on something, copy selector, right? And that'll give me like this really big sort of selector to this. So I can put that in. My paste isn't working. Copy selector. I'm gonna paste again. Yeah, I don't know why my paste isn't working, but that was going to be like div with an arrow and that sort of stuff. This will accept anything. Now I'm just using the ID because it was really useful. What's also really kind of neat is, let's say you did have like a very difficult element on the page to actually select, right? Let's say it's like looking at the page, let's say it was this phone number, right? So if we inspect this phone number, right, its selector is, I will copy the selector, and let's see if I go and can I paste in here? Yeah, it's like this, because like it doesn't have any kind of like identifiable things in it. There's no name, there's no ID, there's nothing. So it's got like this body, main, section, div grid, all these sorts of things, all the way down to that link, right? I could copy this, right? And I could put it into here or whatever if I wanted to assert that I saw that phone number on the page. But I mean, like, what happens if like our designers think, you know what, actually, instead of like it being an MGBXL, what if it's like an MG, I think that's margin bottom XL. So let's what if it's like margin bottom large? What if there's just too much space, right, on that thing? That's going to break that selector, right? And that could be a pain in the butt, because like maybe I've got that selector pasted in like 50 different tests, for instance, right? Dusk has this idea of Dusk selectors as well that you can use, right? And you can register them in your Dusk test. So if we go to our Dusk test case, there's these things called global selectors. Actually, not there. Let me go to the documentation for Laravel, and we'll talk about site selectors. I think they're called site elements. So global shorthand selectors. And so base page, oh, the page class has that. So if I go to pages and I open up my page, there's these different selectors. So I could say phone number, and then I could maybe, yeah, I can paste in that selector. And then if on my test where I say I want to assert that the link for the phone number is like our phone number is what it actually is, I can use the selector at phone number instead. It's kind of like an alias for this long string, which kind of gives me a little bit more more flexibility for, or a little bit, maybe not flexibility, but robustness. It mitigates the risk that my tests are going to break all over the place because of like a change to from XL to L. If that happens, I just have to change it here as opposed to 50 other different places in my application, which was really useful. So those are Dusk selectors, and they just start with an @ sign. And then you can have whatever you want, which is really kind of cool. Luckily, for this application, I didn't need to do that though. So we do have some names on these input fields because they're part of the post, and they are name, email, comments, and then the button that I want to press. This is a new behavior or a new ability that we have with the browser is the press. So it will look for buttons, or I think it's buttons or links that look like buttons, or inputs with a type of button or type of submit. It's like a kind of like a catch-all for all of those sorts of things. And you pass it, you can also pass it a selector, you can pass it the text that shows up in the button, you can pass it the name of the button, all those sorts of things, okay? So basically I go to the page, I pause, and then I find these elements on the page, right? And I type these values in. Now, some of the things that also that I thought was actually really kind of cool, and it seems like they thought of everything, or actually a lot of people use it and they have a bunch of different like needs, is sometimes like, let's say you're doing like a type ahead or something like that, and you want to make sure that your type ahead is working. If you say type this is pretty much just like a copy paste, I think, into that input field. But there's also type slowly into this attribute, and you can say like, how long do you want to wait in between keystrokes, right? So this third parameter here is the pause, so like 100 milliseconds or say 200 milliseconds in between, and we could see that actually happening. Actually, you know what? Okay, it's past 8. I was going to run this test without headless and actually see that because I'm kind of interested, but I can do that myself. So I'm just going to get rid of that. All right, I'm going to type that in, and I'm going to press that contact button. Now, this is also another thing that's actually kind of neat, this when available. So you remember when we went to here and we typed in my name, Colin, my email address, and hi there, and we hit submit. This is the test, yeah, that there was this confirmation modal popped up, right? And it has a certain amount of information. Hello, Colin, thanks for talking to us. I wanted to make sure that this confirmation modal showed up as well, but it's not immediately on the page, right? So going back to the test, I can say when this thing is available, and I just give it another selector, so any selector on the page, and this one just happens to be called confirmation modal, then it scopes it to this as well, and I can say, hey, I want to make sure that in the modal I see hello Joe Schmo, right? And that's pretty great. So that's when available. So it will wait up to 5 seconds for this selector to appear on the page. And then if it doesn't, it will fail. But if it does, then it will invoke this function to make assertions on the things that I see within the scope of that element that I'm actually looking for on the page, which I thought was super cool. This is what then further in the test, this is where we get down to the into like the gray box part of these tests, is that I get to then go into my database and I say, hey, give me the first message that's in the database and just assert that it's the message that I was looking for. Okay, and I thought that was really cool. And you might be thinking, oh, Colin, but like, how do you know it's the first one, right? Well, that's because I can use the database migrations trait because it's just like PHP unit. So database migrations will, for every test that runs here, it will run my migrations, run the test, and then roll back all of my migrations, right? You can't use refresh database because a lot of this happens within transactions or something like that. There's something in the Dusk documentation about that. They specifically say you can't use refresh database, which is another trait used in testing. You have to use database migrations. So I just said, okay, I mean, like, I'm going to trust you, and that's what I'm going to do. And it worked great, worked really good. So there you go. And this test works really good, actually. So I can run this test. If my paste works, yeah, all right, fine. And this will pass. We've seen it pass already. Now, one of the interesting things, though, is like this, like, go here, type this, type that, type this, press that. What happens, Colin, if, like, you know, on the contact form, we want to add another field, right? Or we want to do something else, and we have like this and a bunch of other spots in our application. So Dusk has this idea of components, right? So just as like in your application, you might have various components in your UI, right? Dusk also says, hey, you can have like elements that we call components, and then you can have programmatic control over them as well. So I thought this form, this contact form, is effectively a component, right? So I wanted to do that. So in order to make a component, they show up here in your components directory, by the way, you can use the Dusk command. So you can say artisan Dusk component, and then it's like demo. And that will make my demo component for me, right? That'll show up in here somewhere. Come on now, there it is. So I wrote another test that uses with the form component, and I got it like this, right? So basically you say, visit the contact page, pause, and then with the contact form component, right, then fill in the, basically what it does is it gives you another callback function with another browser instance, and you can have like browser fill in the contact and submit the component, right? And these methods, fill and submit, they exist in my contact us form component. So let's look at the anatomy of a Dusk component, okay? So the first thing that you need to have is, what is the selector for this component? So how do I find it on the page? And so for the contact us form, it's just form. There's just it's the form tag, really, that I said, just look for it. Like your selector is likely going to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? It could be something else, I guess. And then the next thing you need to do is have an assert method, which is basically asserting that it's on the page, right? So this, you can have anything you want, but for the most part, you don't really need to change this. So when it loads that component, it just wants to make sure that it's on the page before it does anything else. So if it can't find it on the page, this will fail, and you'll get a failure saying, hey, that component doesn't exist on the page. And then you have, similar to like the page class that you have, which is like your global site elements, you can have the actual elements on your page that you want. So I had a name element, an email element, a comments element, and a submit element, and these are their selectors within my form component, right? So name, email, comments, and contact. So if we go back to this test, you can see that I say fill it, right, with this contact information, which I have up here, which is just an array. And then so this fill method exists in the contact us form, just down here. And then so all of the methods that exist in your components, the first parameter is always going to be a browser, and then you can have whatever else you want. So you'll see that this method here actually accepts 2 parameters, but when I'm calling it in the contact us form, it's only accepting that 1 parameter. So Laravel in its magic call for like this browser object will say, hey, do I have a component? Does it have a method called fill? Yes, okay, well then call that method on the component, passing in the browser and whatever else they gave us. That's kind of how it works under the hood, which is really kind of neat. And then I can just take from there, and I can take that type, which was from the very first test, right? This type. I just put it in my fill method. And then the submit, again, was just press submit. And so from the original test, it was press contact. And you'll remember that I gave in my, maybe I'm going too fast, sorry. Tell me if I'm going too fast. In the elements part, I said the submit Dusk selector lined up with the contact actual page selector. So when I said submit, it just presses that submit, and it works from there. So the test now reads, in my opinion, a little bit better. So it says, go to the contact page, and then again, wait for that 1000 milliseconds. And then using the component that I have, fill in the form and submit it. And then we're just back to when the confirmation model is available, make those assertions. And then again, the same assertions here about the message. And then from this one, I was able to clean it up a little bit because I have the contact message that I was passing into my component just extracted here. So it's pretty much the exact same test, and it's a little bit cleaner, and it kind of like abstracts away what this form is. In the documentation, the example that they use for a component is a date picker, which if you've ever written a date picker, or if you ever interacted with a date picker or programmed a date picker, it gets wild with its selectors and things like that. So having like a component for that date picker is actually like really nice, because they have like, in the example, there's methods like select this year, select this month, select this day, like those sorts of things. So it was really kind of like a powerful example that they used. Yeah. All right, and that was filling out pages. Okay, we're just at the last example coming up. So thanks for sticking with me if you're still here. I can't see anybody. All right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the jobs board, right? So in the vehicle website, if you click We're Hiring, you can see all the jobs that we're hiring for. So we're currently hiring for a back-end developer and a front-end developer, and the full stack developer as well. And then so you can read all their little blurbs, and then if any of these entice you, you know, you can go to vehicle.com right now and apply. You can click View Position, and then that will tell you more about what the actual applicant, like what the position's about, and then gives you an opportunity to say, okay, well, I'd like to work out of the Waterloo office or the Hamilton office or the London office. Then you can fill in your name, your email, upload your resume, add some comments, and submit. Okay, so I wanted to be able to test that this actually worked. And the thing that I was a little bit worried about at this moment was file uploads. I was thinking, oh, come on, I mean, like, I'm going to be able to do file uploads with Dusk. That's a bit of a stretch, but sure enough, of course you can. And it's actually very simple. So I'm going to show you that test of how we can actually do this. And it was actually kind of difficult to get to, because if you remember going to We're Hiring, there's no form down here. I have to like find one of these view position links, right? And then go to there. But there's more than one view position link on the page, right? So how do I get the first view position or the second one or something like that? So I had to figure that out as well. So let's dig into that, and then we'll wrap up, okay? All right, so I put that in my my tests, my jobs form test. All right, so this was my first crack at this test. So basically within that browser, I wanted to visit my jobs board, and then I wanted to wait that 1000 milliseconds just to make sure that I was there. And then I wanted to make sure that, yes, I was in fact on the jobs board. And then what I wanted to do was grab that link and then click it. Now, the one thing that I couldn't figure out from the Dusk documentation was like, how do I target like the nth link on a page so that I can click it? something along those lines, because there's clicking links, right? So there was like, if it's actually this easy, I'm gonna get a little upset, but there's like click link, right? And like this will accept a link, and then oh, that's interesting. It accepts like a selector as the second parameter. And then so like this link is typically, if you remember for click link, I think it uses a jQuery. Yeah, it uses a jQuery selector, which is like assert that the element contains this link and it's visible, and it finds that, and it gives you, God damn, it gives you the first one. Sorry, it doesn't matter because I learned a lot. I learned a lot about moving, what I can do if I couldn't find this. Like what happens if maybe I wanted the second link? Okay, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do the second link, and so what I ended up learning was that under the hood, the browser uses this method on the Chrome WebDriver called find elements. And that find elements method actually uses as its parameter something called a WebDriver by, right? So this is getting deep into the Facebook code for WebDriver and whatnot. And there's all sorts of like static constructors that you can look by. So the WebDriver, there's all sorts of different ways that you can actually construct these finders. So you can say, WebDriver by class name. You could say by CSS selector, which is what Dusk uses by default. You can say by ID. You could say by name. You can say by link text. You can even say by partial link text. So there's all these different, or by tag name, like how many more are there? There's XPath. There's all these sorts of things that's available to you if kind of like the nice Laravel side of things doesn't actually give you access to that. You can dig down a little bit deeper, and you can use the driver directly. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to look for the link text, right? So I said, using the browser's driver, find the elements that have the link text view position. And it gave me back an array of those links. And then I said, just click the first link. But again, I could say like, click the second link or click the third link or something like that. But I'd say click the first link. And then again, wait that 1,000 milliseconds to make sure that it's there and assert that I can see the form, okay? And now it's the same as the contact form, right? Type in my name, type in my email, type in my comments, and then we have this attach, which is really kind of neat. So attach accepts the selector of like your file input, and then you give it like a path to a file that you've got, right? So this is, I said resume.pdf. And so I put that in my fixtures. And so it's just a PDF, right? Because we have to say that they are it has to be PDF. And then I'm gonna press the apply button. And then when that confirmation modal is actually available on the page, I want to see the text received your application. And this works. This is great. You saw it work already, but let's just run it again just to make sure. Oh, and then I did another kind of gray box thing. It said assert that the database has a job application in it. So let me do the art dusk filter equals it can accept the job application, and then go from there. Now this will run and it will pass. But looking at this test, again, I think that this is a meaty test, right? It has a lot in it, and it doesn't read that great, like especially like this part here. It doesn't have that like streamlined look of all the other tests. Oh Lord, it failed. I have to find out what that's about. Actually, so it did fail. You didn't see the confirmation modal after 5 seconds. That's interesting. Trust me, it does pass though. And then I thought that this was kind of ugly. It didn't follow that like kind of streamlined look of all the tests that I've had before. So how can I make this test a little bit better? And so again, Dusk has you here. So Dusk has this idea of pages, right? So a page is a way of kind of like taking a page that you're on, like this jobs page, and then making an object in your application code that you can then add behavior to, right? So I was able to take this large test up here, and I was able to turn it into, go to the jobs page, view the first position, and apply for that position, right? And then assert that I have an application in my database, which is really kind of cool. So again, just to make a page with Dusk, it's artisan. Oops. Oh boy, what was that? There we go. It's artisan Dusk page and then demo page or whatever it happens to be. And so that will create the page for me, and it'll show up in this pages spot here. So there's the demo page. And then so the anatomy of a page again is you have to tell it what the URL is of the page, right? You have to tell it how to make sure that the page is actually there, right? And so for the most part, you probably won't have to change this. And then again, just like the component, what are the elements on the page? And then you can add any other functionality you want as well. And that kind of gets melded into the browser instance that you're using to write your tests with. So I have a jobs page, and this is what it looks like. So the URL was /jobs. And in order to make sure that I was on there, there's that 1 second pause. And then I want to make sure that I see jobs on the page. To view the first position, here's that chunk of code that used the underlying like driver instance to find the elements by the link text, and then click on that, and then wait again another second and make sure that my form is visible on the page. So that was view the first position. Applying for the position, again, was just that chunk of code here that typed into the name field and the email field and the comments, and then did the attachment and pressed the apply. Now that I'm thinking about it, because they're so similar, I could probably even instantiate a contact form in here, call it something else or something like that, and then use the contact form to fill out Joe Schmo and his email and the comment. It wouldn't be I need this job, but it could be something else. And then attach, press the apply button, and then assert that we see that. So a page in Dusk is a really nice way of kind of like containerizing all that behavior that you can actually have with a page, all the interactions that you can have with a page, which is really kind of cool. And it makes the tests really nice to read. And again, that level of abstraction gives you the ability to say, like, if for some reason the positions changed and the selectors or something along those lines, you're always viewing the first position, but like how that's actually implemented could be something different in the future. But your test here doesn't actually have to change to support that. The actual page that it uses would, which is really kind of neat. And you see here that you, instead of visiting like the URL or something like that, you can just pass it an instance of a page, and it will use the URL method on the page to say, this is where I need to go, which is really kind of cool. Hopefully, hopefully it passes. I'd be really interested in seeing why it failed, which again, with Dusk, you can do by taking a look at that screenshot. So let's see if this passes. And if not, we'll just say, you can just trust me that it passed in the past. Hey, there we go. Got a passing test, which is great. I'm not sure what the other tests that it's running are. That's kind of neat. Oh, they both passed. Great. So that is kind of like the whirlwind tour of Dusk that I wanted to give today.